Our second speaker is Poornima Vijayashanker. She is the former founding engineer at Mint.com. In addition, she's the founder of Bizee, a customer management software for yoga studios.
And in 2007, she started a blog called Femgineer, www.femgineer.com, as a creative outlet for passion in engineering and writing. Today, Femgineer is an...
Nobody wants to be an entrepreneur? Everyone's here tonight? Okay, some of you. So the one question I get asked all the time is, what was your plan, right? And I said, well, when I was 8, I had this one small business, lasted for like a day. My neighbor and I sold popcorn balls. We didn't make a single sale. We didn't make a single dollar. And my parents also didn't really appreciate their 8-year-old, very little Indian girl running around the streets trying to make money. And so all along that time I thought, maybe my parents don't want me to make money and maybe this whole entrepreneur thing isn't for me. And so I completely switched gears and decided I'm just going to be a writer, a lawyer, and a professor. Good for you. Because all I wanted to do was write, speak, and teach. And then somewhere along the way, and once again, because this is a Tamil community, you probably had the experience of getting involved in some sort of tech thing. So for me, it was programming the VCR. And then, making sure the vacuum cleaner worked at home. And then I got a little bit more advanced as I got older, and my brother and I would take our computers apart. But I never had intended to become an engineer. In fact, I thought it was the most boring career in the world, because my dad did it. And I saw that every day he would just get up and go to his cubicle from 9 to 5. And I thought, that's not what I want to do when I grow up. And then when I got to college, because I wanted to be a lawyer, I majored in economics, and I just kept my focus on that. But after my first semester, I was like, this is so dull. Like, all I do is write papers. Where's the building? Where's the, interesting things to do? So I took my first computer science class, and I just immediately fell in love. I loved the process of building. And, as I continued to take more classes, of course, my parents were really happy. They're like, oh good, our daughter is going to be an electrical engineer. She's going to be set for life. So then I did this interesting thing. I moved all the way up to Silicon Valley, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to be an engineer. But I started to get bored. And by this point, Google had just IPO'd. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. There's this huge startup scene. I wonder what's involved. And so I decided to go to Stanford. Once again, my parents were like, oh, good, she's going to get a master's in computer science. And then this interesting thing happened. My buddy from Duke, Aaron Patzer, called me up and said, I'm thinking about starting a software company. And it's going to be about personal finance. And I said, oh, that sounds interesting. I like finance. And then he said, yeah, I'm really struggling with coming up with a name and building up a product, and I need some engineers. And so while we were on a road trip, I came up with a name. I said, what do you think about Mint? And he was like, yeah, I really like that name. And then after that point, I started to get really, really interested in building this product. But I was up to my eyeballs in student loans. I was at Stanford, I had this job, and so I was like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to manage to go work for this startup. And then this very fateful day happened in about August 2006, where I showed up to work, and my manager came up to me and said, we need to talk to you. I was like, oh, what's going on? Did I do something wrong? So he was like, yeah, just you, just come into my office. And he's like, so your job has been impacted. Impacted? Is there a meteor that got me? I didn't know. He's like, yeah, we're gonna have to let you go. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. I was like, shit, I'm gonna be out of a job. And they're like, oh, here's your severance package. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I took the money, and I had about 6 months of runway, and I took the layoff as a sign that it was time for me to go and work for Mint. And at that point, we were about to raise some capital, so I had just enough to, get by. And starting from that point in 2006 all the way to 2009, I helped build Mint, and we sold it for $170 million. So now you probably think, okay, well that's great. She's made some money. She should go, buy a small island, drink some pina coladas. same thing. They're like, okay, now you can relax. You can start a family and, don't have to work so hard. I'm like, no. This is just the beginning. They're like, what the hell's wrong with this girl? I was like, no, I was an engineer, and that was great. But now I want to do something different. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to know what it's like to actually build a company. And I want to do things a little bit differently. And my parents were like, oh God, here we go again. And so in 2010, I decided to start Bizee Bee. And the premise behind Bizee Bee was that I had been doing yoga for about 6 years. And I was doing yoga, but I didn't really think anything of it. So when I was trying to think about ideas for business, I thought, well, I could do something in voice recognition, or I could do image processing. And then I was like, is that really going to get me out of bed every day? Is that what I want to build for the next 5 or 10 years? And I thought, that's not interesting, but I really love yoga. So what can I do in that space? So initially, I had noticed, all these studios were cropping up. Even the famous Canadian company Lululemon was taking off. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to help these studios that are cropping up manage their business better. I think I can do it. I know how to build a simple product, and that's what I'm going to do. So I started Bizee Bee, and I thought it was going to at least be a cakewalk initially, right? I was like, I just sold my last company, on to the next one. It should be easy. But it wasn't. In fact, I went through a lot of challenges in the first year alone in terms of hiring quality people, keeping them motivated, getting the product off the ground, getting some amount of capital, still bootstrapping the business. And so the amount that I've learned in just 1 year of running my own company was probably more, even more than I had probably learned in the 3.5 years that I had been at Mint. And so every year there was a new challenge. The first year was getting the team dynamic. The second was getting the product out. The third was generating enough revenue so that we could keep the lights on. And then, people ask me, so why did you start this thing with Femgineer? Well, that was a little bit of a tangent, right? Because like I said, I had all these plans, and none of my plans have actually, my life has gotten better than what I planned, but I've always veered off course a little. So in 2007, I started writing this blog, Femgineer, and I just wrote it because I wanted to write. And at the time, I, thought I'd write about engineering and entrepreneurship because that's what I knew about. I hadn't actually, had any sort of grandiose vision for it. And then about, I'd say 9 months ago, I was getting a lot of speaking opportunities and some teaching opportunities. And there was also a point where I was on a panel and with some other prominent women in tech in Silicon Valley. And the question came up of, who here on the panel has had any sort of, adversity at work? And everyone was like, oh, been piece of cake. I was like, what, really? And every woman on the panel was just like, oh yeah, there's no problems. We have no, discrimination. We've been able to get promotions, etc. And I was like, really? Because every single one of those problems I've actually faced, or I know somebody else who has. And so that's when I decided that I really wanted to, amp up Femgineer, not just for the women, but also for the men. I had seen a number of them also getting passed up for promotions or not getting the jobs that they deserved. And so the focus of Femgineer really became to help people, tech professionals and tech entrepreneurs, level up in their careers and to use education as the way to do it. And so now you're probably thinking, wow, how does this woman get any sleep, right? She's got Bizee Bee, she's got Femgineer. Well, here's the secret. As I was building Bizee Bee, all along, my co-founder and I had always said, this needs to be a business where we don't have to sit there and manage people. We need to make sure that we hire good enough people to get things done. And we need to build a product that's so push-button that these yoga studios and these businesses aren't going to ask us to train them. And that way, we can basically just put it on the back burner or let it run. We're not going to have to constantly maintain it. So we're trying to build a different company. And in the process of doing that, that gave me a lot of freedom, right? It gave me the freedom to do speaking. It gave me the freedom to pursue Femgineer. And so the reason I bring that up is because part of what I was trying to do in bootstrap bootstrapping the business, even though it was a harder approach than raising capital, was that I wanted to do things a little bit differently. I wanted to do things my way. And then the other approach was with Femgineer was I wanted to do something that, I was always passionate about Bizee, but I was even more passionate about bringing in and building up a more prominent tech community, right? Making sure that people who felt like they weren't getting the skills, they weren't getting the jobs, they weren't getting themselves to the next level would have a way to do that. And so the reason I bring up all these stories about myself is because I meet a lot of entrepreneurs who say, yeah, I want to start a business, or, can you mentor me, or, I want to know how I can take this idea and make it into a product. And the people that I've mentored and I've talked to, I've noticed that one of the biggest hurdles for them isn't that they lack ideas, or lack skills, or lack talent, but it's that they really lack a lot of confidence in themselves, right? And the reason I say they lack confidence is because they're oftentimes afraid even to take that first step, even to say, okay, I'm now going to quit my full-time job and take this position, or I'm going to set aside an hour a week to maybe, pursue this idea. And I'm not 100% sure why there is that hang-up. But if you do have that hang-up, I want to let you know it's okay, right? You're going to make mistakes. That's just the course that you have to take. But I think the bigger challenge is for you to make some small incremental wins for yourself, right? So even if it's, I'm going to try to get one customer today, or I'm going to try to build this prototype, or I'm going to try to recruit one more person to help me on this project. Each of those small wins is what you need to then get a bigger win, right? Too often we have a grand vision, but we don't know what to do in the day-to-day. So you've got to break it down. And then the second is this idea of risk, right? A lot of times people ask me, well, you're really risky. I could never be like that. Like, no, it's not that I somehow have some unique gene that, other people don't have. But part of taking risks, as Jay says, is that you have to take calculated risks. But the other thing is, it's this concept of risk versus regret, right? I don't want to wake up when I'm 70 and be like, wow, I really had this great idea for this personal finance, company, and then I had this really great idea for this yoga software, but then I decided it was too hard, or yeah, I had a roadblock, or I ran out of capital, right? A lot of times, whenever we hit one of these roadblocks, it's an excuse to just stop, right? So the idea should be, we don't want to have these regrets later in life. We want to at least have given it our best shot, and to keep doing that. So the third thing that I want to leave you with is, if you are going to pursue being an entrepreneur, a lot of times people ask me, well, I don't know about tech, or I don't know how to build a product. Part of the entrepreneurial journey is to just be resourceful, right? So if you don't have the capital, you figure out how you can make the capital yourself. If you don't have the team, you figure out how you can recruit the team. If you don't know how to make the product, you either figure out how to do it or get someone else to, right? A lot of what you're doing is this constant learning and educating yourself. So to me, if you had told me years ago when I was 8 that someday you'll make $1 million, I'd been like, okay. I never would have imagined it. And then if you had said, no, it will happen, I'd be like, no. Because to me, every time I made a choice, it wasn't because of the money. It was actually because I wanted to learn more, right? I wanted to learn what it was like to build a product from scratch. I wanted to learn what it was like to run a company and to feel the hardships of that. And then I wanted to learn what it was like to educate other people about the journey. So I think really what entrepreneurship is about is actually changing the world around you. And not only changing the world around you, but having that long-term vision. And like I said, taking those incremental steps and not holding yourself back. And if you find yourself holding yourself back, then it's a matter of saying, why am I doing this? What am I fearful of? And, at some point, you actually have to just... I actually had a pretty negative experience. I actually ran out of money for Bizee. And the reason it happened, and this was my worst fear, the reason it happened was because we had our second product that we were launching, And it was supposed to be done in the first 4 months of 2012. And I put in about 100K to make it happen. And then our vendor calls us up and says, oh, we're switching the API, you're gonna have to rework the product. I was like, okay, I don't have any more money. So I made another withdrawal from the Bank of Poornima to redo the product. And this was the last withdrawal I could make. So then, 8 months in, we did launch the product. And things were going really well, to the point where we were gonna be break even, if not profitable, in 6 months. And then I got this interesting call from some people in Australia. And they were like, yeah, we don't know who this Bizee Bee is, but our credit card is being charged. I was like, you go to yoga? No, we don't go to yoga. Do you Pilates? No. Any fitness? No. It's like, oh, okay, something's up. So what I uncovered was that our billing solution, which made it really easy for people to run credit cards and get paid out the next day, basically became a money laundering scheme. And so I was like, okay, how am I going to deal with this? So at that point, I basically had to do two things. I had to shut the product down, I had to let all my staff go, and I had to figure out a way to come up with the money to pay back all of the debt. So that's when I had the idea that I would not freak out. And I actually had my parents, they were like, we have to go to India. I'm like, what? Like, do you not understand I'm up to my eyeballs in debt here? They're like, come back and figure it out. I'm like, what? They're like, you don't have any college loans, you could go take a bank loan and pay this off. Like, I don't think the bank is gonna take to money laundering. So, this is when I decided that maybe there was some money in FEmgineer. And I had been teaching a lot, and that's when I decided that I would start this online courses. And so for my first class, I decided I'd put up a one-page ad on my blog saying, I'm going to teach product development. And I had to do so with, get enough students within a month, because I was going to India, because I was trying to be a good daughter. And so within that month, the last day that people could sign up, I had this influx of students. Unfortunately, I raised enough money that I paid back the debt. I went on my trip. And so I was like, okay, problem solved. So the reason I bring this story up is because, many of you will have this experience where you'll have that oh shit moment of, wow, I'm really up to my eyeballs in problems, how am I going to solve it? And the reason I bring it up is it's not a time to give in. It's not a time to, run away scared, but it's actually a time to say, okay, I know I've dealt with the problem harder, how can I fix this?
That's life.
Exactly. So, thanks for the introduction. So, I want to bring this story up because I think too often people don't share some of the battle wounds that they go through. And I'm hoping that this at least will open your eyes to entrepreneurship is going to be hard, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try it. And that what you'll learn out of doing this is going to be a lot more valuable than if you decide to take a more secure path. It's not to say that you shouldn't take a secure path in life, but if you have the opportunity, right, if you have the idea, and you have a level of guts, then you should definitely go for it. Thank you.